And hit record. Okay, so it's recording now. But yeah, following Jennifer's sentiment of thank you everyone for joining today with
Mhm.
us virtually and being accommodating with us switching to from in person to virtual.
Awesome. Amy, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Amy Thorstensen, Golden Sands RC&D Advising Director.
And we have Asher with us as well.
Hi, I'm Asher Malapart. I'm the Regenerative Agriculture Specialist, working out of the Stevens Point office, Golden Sands RC&D.
All right, thanks. So before I introduce our guest speakers today, I just want to plug two upcoming TAP Talks that we have next month in April. We are going to be celebrating Earth Day with a very special edition of our TAP Talk, always on the third Thursday of the month. And that is going to be hosted by Anello Malika, one of the owners of Central Waters Brewing Company. And Anello is going to tell us about all the sustainability practices that are built into their operation and their brewing, and there's a ton of them. Central Waters was the first brewery in Wisconsin's Green Tier program. And so they really put a focus on sustainability, and they make great beer. And then Anello is going to take us on a tour of the brewery. So be sure to join us on that for an in-person tap talk in April. And then in May, Portage County's own Andrew Senderhoff, along with Golden Sands RC&D's Chris Hammerla, are going to be presenting about Portage County lakes, all the management plans that are in place to support them and what's being done with them, and maybe even get some good fishing tips. Sorry, my dog is barking in the background. So join us the third Thursday of April and May, and then we take a break for the field season, and we'll be back with TAP Talks again in October. So without any further ado, and so that I can mute myself, sorry, Rain, barking at my cat. I'm going to introduce our speakers from the Prairie Chicken Project, Bill Koepke, and also from the Prairie Chicken Project and Portage County, Shawn O'Connell.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. I think I forget who has control of the slides. Shawn, do you have the,
Yep,
or
I
is
got
it
control. I'll share it right.
perfect? Oh, there they are. Sweet. Well, yeah, thanks everybody for joining us for this virtual tap talk. My name is Bill Koepke. We'll be getting a little bit more into that later in my portion of the presentation today. And I'm really excited to give this talk. I gave a version of it this year at Pheasant Fest over in the cities to a bunch of sportsmen, landowners, people from all over. There were like 28,000 people or 29,000 people. I don't remember correctly, but there were a lot of people interested in what we were doing here in central Wisconsin. And Shawn's going to definitely dive into the history of where we are today. And then I'll chat a little bit more about what we're doing specifically with the Prairie Chicken Project to help our friends in conservation, as well as our grasslands and the birds that live there. So really appreciate you all taking the time to jump on instead of going to play in the snow, which I hope we all get to go do shortly after this, after we've drank a few beverages and talked about some funky chicken. So with that, Shawn, if you would, my friend, take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bill. So Bill is one of the people that I get the pleasure of working with in my role as the senior conservation tech in Portage County. And I get to work with some really cool birds as part of that job as well, in correlation with the farmers that I work with out in that area as well. But yeah, so we'll talk about some Wisconsin prairies, and in correlation with that, a species that really need those Wisconsin prairies as well. So without further ado, I want to start off kind of just saying, what is a prairie? So prairies are made up of mostly grasses, sedges, and wildflowers. They can take many different forms too. And some prairies have, a few trees, but normally not many. It all depends on what type of prairie you have and what species are growing out there, and also the location of that prairie. Wisconsin's prairies fall into the three basic types, which I will now go through as well. So Wisconsin has three major types of prairies, one of them being dry prairies. Who would have guessed dry prairies have little water? They also have very dry, shallow soils, which are mostly with sand or limestone. In our area, mostly sand. And that being probably the major ones that are over and down in the Buena Vista wildlife area south of Point and also east of Rapids. They usually have some steeper slopes, but they can also be in the flat ecosystems as well. And these are some species that are common out there. We got coneflowers, some blue stems, just great species that always love those dry ecosystems. Another one that we have is a mesic prairie. So there's some water out here. These enjoy the sandy and silt loam soils. So these like a better soil, and they convert those soils very well. These are the more common ones that we see out in the Buena Vista, Loyola Marsh, and stuff like that in the areas like that. They have very good drainage. These soils normally don't have a lot of water sitting in the uplands or anywhere else. They usually they flow down to their lowland areas, and then the soils basically take up that water very well. By the late fall, flowers may reach up in these prairie systems to be 4 to 6 feet tall. That's quite high, and the root systems can be even double that. It absolutely is incredible when you start digging into those and walking through some of these mesic prairie regions. So again, some species we got the blue stem there on the bottom right, some more coneflowers, so just some really cool species that make up in the mesic prairies. And then we got the ones that I work in predominantly and the most in the west side of Portage County and also the east side of Wood County is our wet prairies. And this make up most of your Paul J. Olson wildlife area, which we'll be talking about as well. So these have lots of water, and the plants resemble that. They mostly are confined to your clay soils and some of your peats as well. So it's not in the ordinary to find, some boggy type systems out on some of these prairies in certain spots, and a lot of low-lying marshes in correlation with that. They have very bad drainage. They are predominantly wet 90% of the year. If we got a drought, they'll be dry, but their bottom areas will still be wet. So a couple plants, so obviously the milkweeds are going to flourish very well, and a lot of your sedges. These are what's going to make up a lot of your wet prairie ecosystems. So within Wisconsin historically, anyone want to take a guess how many prairies historically were in Wisconsin? Anyone want to chime in? Dang, a hush falls over the crowd. Okay. So historically, prairies once covered over 2 million acres in Wisconsin, just to put that in perspective. So this being a map of Wisconsin historical data dating back to 1965, when this was created by the University of Wisconsin for vegetation and geology. This is kind of the predominant ecosystems as we see. Prairies used to make up the predominant southern part of Wisconsin, as well as some areas of the north where the soils match. They're usually the drier soils or the shallow soils that can handle a prairie, and that's where they want to grow. But, I'd like to go into this. Is cool. So this is kind of an interesting idea that we've found and we use in presentations when we're giving to the kids and stuff. So in Wisconsin, that we have many towns that are named after different prairies and stuff like that. So with that being said, anyone got any guesses how many towns in Wisconsin are named a prairie in their name? Let's see if I can see the chat as well. Okay, we got 20, I think. Anyone else got any answers?
I'll go a little higher and say 50.
50. Tracy, you can't cheat on this one.
37.
37. All right, let's start going through them. So, let me go back here. Why is this not working? What the heck? Where's my presentation? There we go. Okay. So we got 1, 2, 3. It's a total of, I believe, 13 or 14, if I remember correctly. With that being said, where are we noticing that a lot of these are correlating? They're correlating in that area where prairie ecosystems used to be. They're correlating to where those soils are matching what prairie ecosystems we had, which is kind of a cool relationship that we've noticed when presenting on this. So what happened to our Wisconsin prairie ecosystems? Well, settlers converted a lot of these prairies because of the rich soils. They had lack of trees. Many of the times it was flat landed. So we could use those soils to grow crops, and also just for ease, you could grow them very easily and you didn't have to do much work for it. So currently in Wisconsin, we have less than 12,000 acres of grasslands of it left, natural grassland ecosystems. Lots of plants and animals that need these prairie ecosystems to survive are struggling to survive because of that pure fact that we don't have the grasslands that we used to have and the advancing ecosystems that we need to support them. So just a population contrast that we see. I'm going to skip right over that. So these are kind of the 3 core grassland ecosystems that we have in Wisconsin, in central Wisconsin. So we have the Mead Wildlife Area, we got the Paul J. Olson, we have the Buena Vista, and we have the Loyola Wildlife Area. These are the 3 areas in central Wisconsin that have that natural ecosystem for grassland species. They have those supporting soils, being it a wet mesic, mesic soils, or dry, even down in the Buena Vista as well. So some of these species that need a healthy prairie ecosystem include many that we're seeing as they pop up on the screen here. Different snakes, different species of plants, different birds. All of these require that good soils, that rich soil. Obviously, sandhill cranes they like our flat agricultural landscape, which helps a lot. But the big one that we're going to focus on is the prairie chicken, which is definitely one of the keystone species that need these natural prairie ecosystems to survive and to keep improving on that population. So with that being said, quick, I'm going to have everyone, if they can, hopefully this works. We're going to just kind of take a look. We are out. You're out in the early morning time. Hopefully you guys can see this video. We're out in the early morning. You're sitting over a grassland ecosystem. It's just before light. And you hit to hear this. Yeah, let me get back to the presentation here. Come on. There we go. All right. You get to hear all those interesting, amazing sounds that these 1 in a million birds get to make. They have one of the coolest vocalizations that you can imagine, and they're always a surprise when you get out on those grasslands where they get to occupy. It's really a cool and impressive sounds to hear. So, the greater prairie chicken. So, a little history on the prairie chicken itself. So, they are unique to just grasslands of North America. They are found nowhere else in the world. As settlement kind of moved west out into our area and stuff, and the amount of grassland habitat we lost because of the impact that agricultural populations had on the grassland ecosystem for the ease of harvesting crops out on them and the ability just to turn soil over very easily. Also, the habitat loss, but also the hunting pressure that made these numbers disappear very quickly. Just like the passenger pigeon and other species that went extinct because of hunting, prairie chickens had very similar issues where there was a very mass hunting pressure that really decreased the numbers fast. And in the population, Wisconsin continued to decrease in the 1905s. In 1907, laws were created to restrict hunting in the future. And in 1917, there was a 4-year moratorium actually placed on hunting prairie chickens. And the ban lasted 8 years, and that was in actually Portage County, where we know that they definitely are still to be. So obviously, it did a little something correct to keep that going. And then from 1921, until the last prairie chickens were hunted in Wisconsin, the state only allowed a short open hunting periods until 1955. And by then, the remnant species had the narrow little area in central Wisconsin. And that's the only place in Wisconsin you can see them is in those couple areas that we still have on the landscape. So, with that being said, they're currently a threatened species in the state of Wisconsin, highly threatened. So a little bit of numbers from last year's chicken surveys, which I get to help with and do in the Paul J. Olson area. We had in the Buena Vista wildlife area on these leks that we survey, and we'll go into the details on that, but I wanted to really hit on kind of the number relationship of how many booming males are still out on the landscapes that we know. So in Buena Vista, there's still 216 males that they observed on these leks. In the Paul J. Olson, we only had 40 last year. And these are all averages based upon how many we saw, not a maximum number, not a few number. So that's that average on what we've been seeing. In the Loyola Marsh, there was only 15 observed. And then in the Mead, they heard one day, but they couldn't ever locate it. So they don't identify that as a actual lek, being that there was not more than one bird out on that at a certain time. And also they couldn't figure out where it actually was. So it says 0, but there was one out there, and hopefully that one can bring a population back to that area of the Mead. Just a few photos of prairie chickens. Actually, this is a female up in a tree, just kind of chilling out, kind of overlooking. We have been seeing more prairie chickens up. They do go in trees, but normally it's a shorter, more branchy tree, which they can kind of overlook a whole grassland area and listen for different booming males and stuff like that in different lek locations, and also get a bird's eye view of different predators that might be on the landscape and stuff like that. This is a young male actually sitting on, it looks like a fence, so that's kind of interesting. This is another young male flying through the air. So female prairie chickens, they have the barred brown and white feathers on their bellies and also on their backs. They have a very pale throat patch, kind of right below the beak region. Much smaller heads than the males. So when they're not puffed up, the males, will have a larger head than all the females have. They also have just a dark eye line right behind the eye, and that's one of the key ways to tell the difference between a male and a female. So females incubate and take care of the young. So nesting, they nest in those tall grass clumps actually, and they burrow down underneath, and they will lay anywhere from 10 to 12 eggs in those nests. The eggs hatch after 28 days of being laid. And then the survival rate is all determined of basically what kind of year we're having, and also the kind of predators and the grassland ecosystems that they have for hiding and for nesting. That was one thing we really noticed in decreasing numbers. One of the biggest things that we always have is we kind of can tell if it's going to be a bad year based upon the winter we had, but also that spring from the last year. If it's a really, really wet year, we're going to have a lower numbers because usually the next nest success is not as predominant because they normally get flooded out and they can't find areas for nesting. Also, if we get an April snowstorm, luckily this is a March, so hopefully nothing was nesting yet, which they haven't. They haven't even been. I haven't seen a female out on a lek yet, so hopefully there's no nesting happening yet. There shouldn't be. But if we get a really late April, early May snowstorm like we had a couple years ago, that can definitely put an impact on how many the nest survival and also success. Let me go on to the male prairie chickens, and that's what kind of is the flagship of everyone's has seen when they discuss prairie chickens. So they still have the barred brown and white feathers on the belly, but they have these long feathers on top of their heads that will actually raise from down on their neck. They'll raise up, called pennies, and they do that when they're booming. And that booming sound that you heard is actually made from the orange air sacs that kind of are right on the throat region of the males. The males also have a nice bright orange comb above their eyes that when they're booming or want to display dominancy, they will actually show. And it's very tough to see just without binoculars or being very close to them. But that brown or that orange is there when they're trying to be kind of more dominant. So yeah. These are just kind of some cool photos taken. Joe Reeder from the Prairie Chicken Festival community, he's taken a lot of these photos. And these are just really some cool dominancy kind of males fighting each other for that dominant position on those leks that we see when you're out on them surveying and stuff, which is really cool. So what are we doing to help with this, this wonderful bird and stuff like that we're trying to bring more predominantly back on the landscape? So what are we doing to help? And that's where a relationship with Bill has come in handy, very much so. So take it away, Bill.
Thanks, Shawn. Well, that was great. I love these birds. I love our Wisconsin grasslands. And a little over a year ago, I realized that something I'd been talking about with some friends was, why don't we have a more modern day group organization that community members can sign up, can help, can donate, bring awareness for. And I realized I just needed to create this group, and we'll get into the nuts and bolts of that on a later slide. But the mission it's simple. It's to promote and support projects that advocate or improve greater prairie chicken or grassland habitat. Here specifically in central Wisconsin is what we're focusing on. And the logo you see here, Prairie Chicken Project, is actually from my friend Alex Lenner. She's a biologist up in Ashland County, Wisconsin. She does a lot of outdoor nature art. And I asked her I commissioned her to make our logo. And I love it. It's simple. It's loud. I was pretty biased, obviously, with Pheasant Fest, but our logo stuck out the most on the banner for the North American Grouse Camp. And there's a simple beauty to her artwork, and this chicken especially, where it kind of reminds me of cave paintings or rock art that we find out west that also includes native prairie grouse. And we'll dive more into art later and just how much it um, matters to our mission here with the Prairie Chicken Project. So, Shawn, if you want to.
Yep.
So, who am I? I have this slide in there, not just to like talk about myself, but also just to spread the message and share with people that you don't have to have a background in conservation, natural resources. I know like when I love these birds. I know that I love our grasslands, what's left of them. The surrogate ones we're working on making right now, right? The ones we're trying to improve out in the Paul J. Olson. But what I do know is that you have to give a damn. Sorry, Jen, I'm going to swear on this. I'm going to cuss a little bit. But I'm a fourth generation Wisconsin hunting dog nut. Top left, you can see my great grandma Frida with a brace of snowshoe hares. She was an awesome lady. She loved chasing some beagles. She loved wild game. She loved gardening. She loved Wisconsin. I'm from northern Wisconsin, so my idea of a prairie was like the unkept part of the neighbor's farm field. I was like, oh, that's a prairie. And then I moved to central Wisconsin for sports medicine school and found the Buena Vista, got my first bird dog. And you can see Django at the bottom. He's flushing a prairie chicken. And then there's a picture of us out in Wyoming hunting blue grouse in the mountains. But I love public land. I own a gym here in Stevens Point, Pearl Street Gym. And you can see the top right picture of me. I grew up with bear hounds. So there wasn't a background of grasslands, knowing what prairie chickens were. But when we moved here, we got Django, and I started talking to photographers, birders, people who were training their dogs. I was asking repeatedly, like, hey, what are we doing? Like, what's, I'd talk to people who have been taking pictures of these birds or running their dogs on these birds for decades, and there was no answer. They looked at me confused, and I looked back at them confused, because I was like, how can you be a member of this community? You can go to this beautiful place, you can see these amazing birds and not want to give back. So for me, I was tired of the people complaining or going to our spring hearings and listening to people talk about wolves instead of, they would interrupt the prairie chicken management plan to ask what we're doing about wolves, and that stuff just annoyed me to no end. So I decided we needed a community organization. Our funding, how we raise money is separate from other state branches, which I think is very important as we head into the future of what state conservation or federal conservation is going to look like. So with this slide, it's just to give you an idea that you don't need to work or understand or be educated in a lot of these fields. You just have to care, and you have to want to give back. So Shawn, if you want to go to the next slide. So the foundation for our program for the Prairie Chicken Project, Shawn, I love that picture of you with Boom and Bob. I'm going to leave that on here forever, but it's all about collaboration, habitat meetings, culture, art, and storytelling. So that top left picture is our very first work day, which was March 2025. And my mechanic is in that picture. There are people from Green Bay. There are college kids. There are people who've never even seen a prairie chicken. There's gun dog owners, but there's just, people are excited. They're interested in getting their hands dirty, right? We're removing the barriers for a lot of this stuff. Shawn and I are taking care of the paperwork on the backside, and we're just trying to make it fun for people to get outside and do good for the endangered habitats around them. And I've been a part of, when we get onto habitat meetings, I've been a part of a lot of nonprofits. I volunteered a lot of time. I was fortunate to have an aunt growing up that had me do a lot with 4-H, volunteering my time, my skills, helping out the community. And so for me, I want to minimize like what time I do have for these volunteer opportunities. I want to minimize that. So we don't have board meetings. I lose track of how many times people message me asking if they can join our board. And I say, if you're passionate about something, you have a cool idea, come to me with that. Shawn and I can meet with them. But otherwise, it's like our whole focus is habitat work, right? We know these birds need more habitat. And so our entire focus is work days, creating awareness for the work days, or things like the Prairie Chicken Festival, and just getting people out on the landscape, doing more for the birds, our grasslands, and then our friends that work in conservation. And then finally, our big thing is I love art. I love looking at old bird art, old grassland art. I love listening to the old stories. And so one of our side things and how we raise awareness is we commission art with people we think that are doing good work, spreading a good message with their skills, their passion, and their artwork. So we're big on that. And then also our model for fundraising is actually built very similar to how we have the North American duck stamp. So our Habitat Fund is primarily funded through people donating for one of our different habitat stamps, and you can see those in the bottom right, along with an old Wildlife Society Prairie Chicken shirt that my girlfriend thrifted, which I felt is the moment we made it, because she identified there's just the unblown up head on the front side of the shirt, and she saw that from a distance and knew it was a prairie chicken. So I think if Shawn and I can keep doing this, keep getting people excited, keep ranting about these beautiful birds, we'll get more people interested and able to identify them and interested in helping us out. And through this talk, I'm big on different quotes, different people that have kind of impacted my idea of land ethic and what we're trying to do with the Prairie Chicken Project. So this bottom one is from Wendell Berry, and Shawn, I'm gonna ask you to read it, just because my old man eyes on my phone screen, apparently I can't read that. So I would appreciate it if you could read it for me.
Yep. The name of our present society's connection to the earth is bad work. It means only that there is much good work to be done by every one of us, and that we must begin to do it. By Wendell Berry.
Thank you, Shawn. Wendell Berry is one of my favorite authors, and that quote really speaks to me. That we've found ourselves in a modern system that perpetuates, as I'm sure everyone from Golden Sands is aware, that perpetuates not the best, most sustainable or regenerative practices for us. So the Prairie Chicken Project is my attempt at us as community members doing good work for not only our planet, but for our local communities. Shawn, if you want to hit next. So this is the collaboration piece. This is for the people who are interested in starting their own group, separate from normal, I would say, state or federal level of funding. People who want to do stripped down community conservation, as I call it. So our 501c3 status, or however you say that, is through the Community Foundation of Central Wisconsin. And they're a nationwide philanthropic community of different local groups that are taking care of all the paperwork on the backside. So we get their tax exempt status. We get access to their network of business owners, their network of people, of angel funds, and all that kind of stuff. And there's a very minimal processing on the backside of it. So when I was first putting this group together, most organizations, most groups of this nature, like a friends group, or I think of just like when I was a board member of BHA, you need multiple people in multiple positions, which in this busyness of life can be very difficult. And so when I was researching the Community Foundation, I realized I could do this in the beginning with just one or two people. And so we were able to get the paperwork signed, go through the Community Foundation and Treasury fundraising. If anyone's interested, you can scan that QR code. It'll take you to their page, show you how it works. They can even help you set up your own nonprofit. I'm more interested in just doing work days with Shawn, getting out on the landscape. So they're going to take care of that, the paperwork for me on the back end as long as possible. We're backing the science with our group. So speaking of collaboration, right, we're working with Community Foundation for our fundraising. When it comes to the work we're doing, it's connected to our Central Wisconsin Grassland Conservation Area, the landscape scale grassland protection project proposed by the DNR and approved by the Natural Resources Board in 2004. When I found out about this, I was super excited and like, all right, well, let's do more for this. And so with that, talking to Lisa, meeting Shawn, realizing he was just as fired up as I was, and that we could adopt the Paul J. Olson Wildlife Area, which gives us also more capabilities, more freedom for the work days we do. And then that leads us into adopt a habitat, right? The whole mission of our group is more habitat. So we've partnered with our local departments and we're helping to get out on the landscape, managing these lands, and as community members taking ownership and helping not only the public land system, but we're helping farmers as well with the work we're doing on the public pastures. Shawn, if you want to hit the next button. Touching on habitat meetings, we're meeting in the places we love. So like I mentioned earlier, with my volunteer time, my free time, I want to spend it in the places I love, doing things I love. So for me and for the Prairie Chicken Project, I'm thinking about how do we build our culture and land ethic. If you know anything about Aldo Leopold, it was just Aldo Leopold week last week. But how do we build that idea with people who are living extremely busy lives, who might be removed from the landscape or only visit it, right? So many of us, we go here, we take pictures, we look for birds, we run our dogs. Well, it's how do we build that land ethic and create an idea of reciprocity for people? So there's a variety of pictures here. The bottom left, I really love. Farmers of Mill Creek came out with all the amazing fun tools, and I was in tears watching just how quickly we were able to make a difference in the landscape on that part of the Paul J. Olson. And I know that area means a lot to Shawn as well. So it was just cool to see the farmers show up and they were excited. And we had people from the university. I had my turkey hunting mentee from the year before. She came out. It was just really cool to have that many people. Top left is a collaboration we've done, a work day last year where we planted seeds. We did a native seed planting with Cousins Forever, Dane County Conservation League. There were gun dog guys from Green Bay who drove out. It was a really cool day and a way to celebrate the wrap up of a workday season. As Shawn mentioned, a lot of these places are wet most of the year, or a good chunk of the year. So we do our work in the winter. Plus the mosquitoes in most of these places would, I think, send most people to the hospital. So we do our work days in the winter and we wrap up. The goal is going to be a celebration in May with Pheasants Forever to do a seed planting. And then, so we've touched on inviting landowners, combining forces, and giving people a shared goal. Something I saw a few people share after our January workday was in a time where it can feel like despair is set in very heavily with a lot of us. It just gave them something to do. It gave them something where they could, put in their little sweat equity, and they could see that they made a difference in their local landscape. And that means a lot for a lot of people when most things these days are digital or seemingly impossible. Shawn, you ready for another quote?
Sure.
Thanks, buddy.
Before I read that, I did want to say that for that, actually, the Habitat Days, we've been having, it started off small. You had, 15 people at that first one, Bill? And now we're up to that one actually in the bottom left corner. The photo doesn't show because we were all done working at about 4 o'clock. But as of around noon that day, I think we were up in the 30 to 40 people almost out on that Habitat Day. So it was a really cool day and a lot of collaboration, which was awesome. So yeah, for the quote, so to those devoid of imagination, a blank space on the map is a useless waste. To others, the most valuable part. Aldo Leopold.
Thanks, buddy. So for me, I think probably everyone on here on this call they feel that, right? Like somebody would drive by one of these areas, not stop, not roll their windows down, not walking past it. They haven't walked through it. To them, right? They're like, oh, why don't we just put a parking lot there or an industrial solar panel field? not to get everyone riled up, but for those of us that enjoy visiting these places, being in them, going to listen to these birds, see these birds, put up osprey boxes kestrel boxes, excuse me. I saw Amber was on here, so I wanted to throw that out there. These places are more than just a blank spot on the map or a bunch of grass. They are what is left of our Wisconsin outdoor grassland heritage, and we want to celebrate that and invite as many people out into these places as we can to help us towards our shared goal. So thanks, Shawn. Next slide when you're ready. Art and storytelling. So I mentioned earlier, thanks, Amber. I love bird art. I love nature art. I go to the Lehocky Art Museum for birds and art every year. As many of their exhibits as I can get to. And I've only known about prairie chickens in Wisconsin for going on 8 years now. And I'm always hunting down old prairie chicken stuff. And it makes me very sad. I can find very, very little of it. So for our fundraising efforts, for our storytelling, sharing and telling people about these amazing birds, it's been really cool in the last year and a half to see how many people have shown me their art, sent me their art for fundraising efforts for our Habitat Fund. The top left there's work from Joe, who Shawn mentioned, are one of the main photographers we're privileged to have here in the area for prairie chicken content. And then Alex Leonard, who did our logo, she's got a couple prints. She has a spring lek and then the summer grassland scenes for the Buena Vista. And that is another way we do fundraising, is people can order these prints from her. The bottom left is actually a belt buckle a friend of mine engraved for a wedding last year. So some friends of mine, they had their wedding at Piffner Park, and they wanted us to have the Prairie Chicken Project at their wedding. So that was actually a really cool fundraising event. And I'm assuming Shawn's going to do the same with his baby's first, all of their birthdays, high school graduation, the whole thing. Like, we're going to have the Prairie Chicken Project at all of these celebrations.
You bet.
Bottom right, a friend of mine did a carving for a print, and I actually use for our thank you cards for our business sponsors or larger private sponsors, but it's just little, and then they can be framed and kept after that. It's a pretty cool thing to not only do the habitat work and to get people out, but also know that what we're doing is spreading art out onto the human landscape, so people are becoming more aware of these birds. Every time I see a big Prairie Chicken Project sticker at a pint night or at a parking lot, I get happy knowing that the word's getting out there. And then the top right is actually, I know it's probably maybe kind of hard to see on the video, or on the slides, but that's actually a cave painting from out west. So I think most people on here maybe will know John Topfer, who did a lot of the prairie chicken research. I want to say late 90s, early 2000s out west here in Wisconsin as well. But he actually spent time with some tribes out in the Dakotas. And these cave paintings are of a prairie grouse. There's like a little red arrow sticking above it, above the people. So these, the sharp-tailed grouse, the prairie chickens, they meant enough to the indigenous people of these landscapes that they carved them on walls in caves, right? Like their stories, their rituals were all about these birds. So I want to keep that going as much as possible. And unfortunately, I'm not allowed to carve things because I would be carving prairie chickens on everything I could find. But I can mail out habitat stickers to people for fundraising, for marketing. And I feel like art, especially bird art, gives people hope. And so with that, Shawn, can you read my favorite Emily Dickinson poem, or part of it, I should say?
You got it. So hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all.
Thank you, Shawn. So yeah, with that, want to go next slide when you're ready.
There we go.
Well, so we've got a little wrap up here. So once again, our mission is built off of collaboration, working with as many groups as possible. Shawn, I was a little overwhelmed and going into my first year of doing this, and then I met Shawn, and I was like, this guy knows a lot. He's fired up. He's got skin in the game. He knows all the people. He's handsome, and I'm extremely excited to see where this goes. Working with groups like Pheasants Forever, Golden Sands has been amazing. Dane County Conservation League, Farmers of Mill Creek. It's amazing to see just and be welcomed, and we've made some great impact here in the first year and a half, and it's been awesome. Habitat meetings, right? We're not going to spend hours of time inside of a building talking about how bad things are, or talking about this, that, and the other thing. We're just going to get outside. We're going to make a difference, and then keep doing the awareness and the fundraising through art and storytelling. And we've got our Adopt a Wildlife sign, which anytime I have a heavy day, or recently, like when Wyoming sage grouse, they're local groups which have been around for a long time, and probably fairly similar to how the Prairie Chicken Project is set up. They were actually disbanded because lack of funding, which is really bums me out, but which is also a reason why I have our funding separated from the whims of market and politicians, right? Ours is through the community foundation. So as long as they're there doing their philanthropic work, we will always have our habitat fund in place. And then I just love that rock last year for the Prairie Chicken Festival on the left. So I took a picture, wanted it to be in here. I think art is amazing. And then the bottom logo image is Alex Leonard's 2026 habitat stamp, which is all about fire. So if you can see the fire and the grass, and then it smolders, it smokes, and then if you actually look at our habitat stamp, there's green growth in front of the boomer. There's feathers, birds flying. She does amazing work, and I'm happy to answer any questions once Shawn wraps it up with one of my favorite Fran Hammerstrom quotes.
So if you're the kind of person who wakes up every morning wanting to make the world a better place, it gives a certain zest to everything you do. I got a couple more slides then too, and we can take questions at the end if that works, Bill.
Perfect. Thank you, Shawn.
Yep. So some of the stuff that we do, or I get to do with Portage County, but also DNR does with volunteers, and there's several other volunteers that help do these surveys in the Mead Wildlife Area, the Loyola Marsh, the Buena Vista, and the Paul J. Olson is Booming Ground Lek surveys. It's a really cool kind of thing we get to do is we get to drive around with our windows down, stopping every half a mile in different grassland areas, different farm fields, and listening for the booming of the prairie chicken. So these leks that you'll see are a rather short grassed area, and actually I cannot lie, a couple of the leks are actually in the middle of a plowed bean field. We're not always I'm not a big component of let's till everything, but for some reason the chickens like this one spot that's been tilled for probably 15, 20 years now. So it's incredible. But normally your leks are a shorter pasture or hay field that's anywhere from 1 inch tall to up to 5-6 inches tall, and that's where they do this booming display. So they're visual, they can see for a long ways, but it's a really cool thing to see. So when we're doing these surveys, so the males return to a lek almost annually. They do sometimes grow and they move around the areas, but more often than not, they are very close to where they were the year before. It's kind of a cool thing that they always get drawn back to doing is they go back to that same lek yearly, annually, every single year. These lek surveys is kind of one thing that we get to do is just drive around glassing. And I want to put a little tidbit in here. So my whole life I've been doing this. I'm 27 now. And the whole reason I got started is from that upper left corner. That's actually my dad, who I lost September of 24. But he was the reason I got into the prairie chickens, and he was kind of my mentor through all this. And the skin in the game, like Bill said, that I have actually a quote from him before he passed away. He said, "Take care of the chickens." So that's my skin in the game, is I got to keep these birds on the landscape for that reason, but not only for that, but also just for the pure beauty of them and for the grassland habitat as well. So along with those Lex surveys, another thing that we do is the Prairie Chicken Festival. So this is an organization that I'm a part of and on the committee with, where we do a festival annually, which will take place on April 11th this year, out at the Aaron Event Barn on that day, in correlation with the farmers of Mill Creek and Portage County. Is we put on a Prairie Chicken Festival where we have exhibitors, presenters, a really good breakfast catered in by Chatterbox. So that's always a highlight, is the breakfast. So a little basically background on the festival this year. So it's going from April 6th to April 12th. It starts off always on Monday, where this year we usually do a movie. This year it's going to be The Big Year, which is a birding movie, actually. And if you haven't seen it, come out to the McMillan Library on April 6th, either at the 1:30 showing, or there also is one at 6 o'clock. And at that showing, here's a little tidbit for you. There's going to be 2 giveaways, one at the 1:31 and one at the 6, for a pair of Vortex binoculars. One will get given away at both of those. So it's a kind of a cool thing that we're doing this year, and a couple huge thank you to the committee for getting that organized through Vortex. And then kind of there's also on Saturday, there is a bird viewing tour at the Paul J. Olson. This is where you basically take a bus around. They pick you up and they take you around to different areas to look at prairie birds and the different prairie ecosystems and the species that make that up. It's really cool. You get to see the prairie chickens on that and stuff like that. And then on the 12th, which is the Sunday, there's also one at the Buena Vista Wildlife Area. So you could actually go to both if you want to see 2 different grasslands and 2 different ecosystems and potentially some different birds at both of those. It's kind of the same tour. You're basically on a school bus, driving around, just looking at the different birds and stuff that you can see. And there's different stops along the way where you get out in glass and kind of see what you can find. And then we also do, with these surveys, then we also take people into Lex and sit in blinds on the Paul J. Olson and also on the Buena Vista wildlife areas. So the Paul J. Olson has sitting in these Lex April 9th through the 12th. There is still spots available on the 9th, which is the Thursday, Friday the 10th, and also the 12th, which is Sunday. Saturday is completely booked with the festival. Usually we get that one booked right away. But come on out to the festival as well and kind of sit and do whatever and converse and have a good breakfast. And then at the Buena Vista, they have sitting through the on the Lex from the 10th to the 12th. But the only spot still available for that is on the 10th. And to book any of these, just go to the Wisconsin Prairie Chicken Festival Facebook page, or also the website, and there is some links on how to and who to contact for booking those viewings. And like I said, the main festival is at Aaron's Event Barn on April 11th. Breakfast, presentations, a silent auction, and then a bunch of exhibitors. And Bill will actually be one of the exhibitors there, so it's really cool to see. This is kind of what the prairie chickens are all about. It's the correlation. It's, like we said, the collaboration of all of it. So this is a lot of photos with the festival. We have the different meetings in the central photo. We got a couple of farmers down there on the right. And then we get all the help to bring in the chicken blinds. And that's actually one of them up on the the Paul J. Olson area up there in the upper right. And the farmers always help us get them in. They're up on a hay wagon. Then we have some steps that run in. That was before we actually put them on a hay wagon, so they're much easier to get out now, and they don't have to be dropped in with a tractor anymore. And then we have Boom and Bob, which is actually getting remade right now. So hopefully we better have him for the festival, because that's always one of the big attractions. And with that, any questions? And also I did include the Wisconsin Prairie Chicken page down below for anyone that's interested.
So I have a question. What are besides man, what are the predators and the threats to the prairie chickens?
So a couple of the different predators that exist. As far as eggs goes, it's normally your possums, your skunks, and stuff like that. Fox, coyotes are a main one. And then as aerial predators, rough-legged hawks are actually one of their main predators that eat out a lot of the birds. So I would say those five. A couple other presentations I've seen is with deer coexisting, and sometimes you see deer actually eating prairie chicken eggs for some reason. If they need protein, they'll eat on different eggs and nests and stuff like that. So there's a whole bunch of species kind of out to get these birds, but those are the main kind of five that I would say are the biggest.
I have a question about the Paul J. Olson area. There was a grazing project where sections of it are being managed through grazing now. How many acres are being managed that way at the PJO?
Ooh, several. A lot of acres are being managed for grazing. I can't give you an exact number off the top of my head. The last number I've seen converted was 200 acres, and that was a couple years ago converted into rotational grazing. But there is certain areas that are looking to have more of it introduced. I know of at least two areas that they're hoping in the next 2 years to have transitioned into a rotational grazing system as well. So I don't have an exact number, but I know of at least there's a lot of area, but the biggest one was about 200 acres added about 3 or 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So they're seeing success with it, good management.
Yep. I think the biggest thing is just the restoring of grass, and then having that disturbance on the landscape is the biggest thing.
So Bill had spoke about the stickers. I know you guys have apparel. There's art. How do people get a hold of those things? What's the best way to acquire those? I know people can support you by donating through the community foundation. Give us all the avenues, I guess.
Yeah, on Instagram and Facebook are the primary ways to contact us, and then there are links on both of those for our community foundation habitat fund, and a donation of $20 or more gets you a habitat stamp mailed out to you. You can go to our bonfire store, so the online merch store. We've got apparel. We have Alex Leonard has her Etsy store set up to buy the prints, and we get $10 from each print sale. And then another big way is work days, getting the word out, showing up, spreading it. Or if you have I've got just about the full summer community event lineup full, so you can follow us on social media. We do one community event per month outside of the workday season. And that's so if you've got ideas for fundraising events, like I said, a friend of mine had us at her wedding, which was awesome. Raised a lot of good money. Anything like that. If you've got ideas for community events, you can also reach out, message us, and those are very helpful as we continue the work we're doing.
If you're looking at apparel too, the Wisconsin Prairie Chicken Festival page also has a bonfire account where you can purchase 2026 festival apparel, as well as the Wisconsin Prairie Chicken Festival apparel as well.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I also wanted to call out a couple of partners. I know you guys alluded to the fact that partnerships are so key in any kind of project like this. And you mentioned Pheasants Forever, Dane County Conservation League, the DNR, of course, Portage County, and all the stuff that you guys do. And I know Tracy's on the call, our county conservationist for Portage County. But there's a couple other partners that we work with pretty closely in prairie chicken habitat that I think were worth a shout out as well. The Nature Conservancy is very heavily involved in prairie chicken habitat improvement. Great Lakes Audubon is a great partner that we work with that also is well invested and deep in that. Our friends, of course, at UWSP are always involved and a great partner and a great resource. Wisconsin Wildlife Federation is another one. So I think it just goes to show that, we're better together. All of us working on this have a common goal and really, rely on each other and lean into each other. And we certainly appreciate all the great work that you guys are doing in the Prairie Chicken Project. And we're proud to partner with you and bring awareness to what you're doing. We'll continue that through social media. And we're just really happy for, the steps you've taken and the effort that you put into this, and really can't say enough about how much we appreciate you. And I think just having a new partner with, new ideas and a fresh perspective has really, brought a lot of energy to the project.
Thanks, Jen. That meant a lot. Thank you. And for the other shout out. We're speaking of Great Lakes Audubon, we've surpassed our fundraising goals for this year already, which is great. Or it tells me I set my goals too low. But we are going to be able to give a habitat donation to our Adopt a Wildlife program fund through the DNR, and also to the Audubon Society, so they can use that money for private land conservation efforts in the Paul J. Olson area, which I'm super excited for, because it's going to be an all of us effort of public and private land. So thanks for the shout out and the reminder, Jen.
My pleasure. Any other questions? I guess one other thing I'd like to just kind of raise awareness about, and maybe Asher can chime in on this if he feels comfortable doing it. You mentioned great managed grazing, and I'm not sure that everybody understands what that is about and how great of habitat that is for prairie chickens, but also a wonderful regenerative agriculture tool. And that is one of our big focuses at Golden Sands RC&D. That's a lot of what Asher's work involves around, and something that we've been, working on for a long time. So I don't know if somebody wants to mention about, how that helps habitat or how that works at all.
If Asher doesn't want to chime in too, I can. Rotational grazing is a great practice on grassland ecosystems. It keeps grass on the grasslands. It basically creates a very simple disturbance through cattle. It's a great way for farmers to coexist on the landscape, but still have that ground cover where you don't have basically a tillage like we were just talking about earlier. So Asher can chime in definitely more, but it's a great practice that we work on at Portage County Land Conservation as well, through managed grazing too. So.
Yeah, well said, Shawn. Sorry, I was working on some other stuff too. But yeah, like Shawn said, the grazing provides kind of a disturbance to keep that vegetation in that prairie system. That and fire, are kind of what shaped those systems in this state, as well as, the rest of North America. So we can still do that with grazing and, design it to be beneficial for that habitat. And it's kind of a neat way to incorporate, some agriculture and, the kind of the working lands kind of aspect into the conservation and, protecting habitat for species like prairie chicken.
and keeping lands working too. It's a great dual use kind of thing. We're a huge agricultural community. We want to keep our lands working, and we don't have to just set land aside for the prairie chickens. We can have it involved in agriculture, helping support our agricultural community and be providing good prairie chicken habitat all at the same time, which is awesome. All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I think we can wrap it up. I see somebody commented, bring back the bison. We do have a local bison farm here that we work with, Back in Time Bison Ranch, that's located, I think, on County Road C, if I'm not mistaken. So they're there. We'd like to see them in bigger numbers. If you know any farmers that are interested in bringing bison back or in managed grazing, send them our way or send them to Portage County, where I know Shawn writes grazing plans as well. We provide that service at no cost to agricultural producers working through grants and government contracts. So if you know somebody that wants to learn more and dive into that realm, send them our way, refer them to Asher or Shawn, and we can help them learn more about that practice and find out if it's right for them. Once again, want to really give a huge thank you to Bill and Shawn for your time today and for all the work that you're doing, and to Prairie Chicken Project and to Portage County as well. Even though we didn't meet there today, want to give a shout out to Central Waters, our great partner. I happen to have a honey blonde here that I'm enjoying this afternoon from Central Waters to commemorate this Tap Talk. And thanks so much for joining us today. And we'll hopefully see you next month out at the brewery on the third Thursday of April and May. And then these guys will be back hopefully in October. We're going to book an in-person Tap Talk. So we'll learn about how this year's Prairie Chicken Festival work and the future things that they've been working on and work days, and continue to watch our social media and theirs as well for other opportunities. So thanks, guys. Hope you enjoy the rest of your snowy Sunday and stay safe out there.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Jen.
Take care.
Thank you, guys.
You bet.
Yep, thank you.